Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. What we do live from Johannesburg, South Africa, in LA, aka Lower Alberton. It's at the top of the hour, 4 p.m. South African Standard Time. And I believe in Canada, well, the Canadian dude is in the house. I am so excited today. I mean, I enjoy talking to all the people that are in studio. But believe it or not, friends, in a moment I'm just so excited to be hanging out with Buhle Dlamini, a long-standing friend and colleague in the work of inclusion and justice and diversity. And it's awesome having him in studio. So wherever you're at, if you're out there, if you've got your friends, come on by, because we are in studio with Buhle Dlamini at the top of the hour. He'll tell us the time in Canada. I don't think I got all my scruples together right here. But today, on In Such a Time as This, we are so grateful that we had Loider in der Moide, who is a fellow of the Desmond Tutu Fellowship of 2017 and currently serving as a model and an activist. Friends, we also have another model who's with us in the house. Yes, when you see how cool he's looking, yesterday when I was with him, he was messing around with, you know, how modelish like he was looking. So he's a model as well today, but a model citizen and a model leader in many ways. And we're excited to have Buhle Dlamini with us right here, right now on In Such a Time as This. And yes, he's arrived in studio. So let me bring him on in. This is Buhle Dlamini, everybody. Hey.
Hey Seth, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
Oh, very good. We are in the summer here, so we enjoying a little bit more sun than what you normally used to. I know that you guys are now dealing with the cold, so enjoy.
Yes. It has been. It's starting to change now, Bushler. But you know
Yes.
the weather is a topic right now in South Africa because it has been quite cold. But yes, we're here with Bushler Dlamini. Bushler, how's it going in Canada? Where actually are you in the world? I know somebody told last night I watched a movie that actually quoted. Well, it wasn't a movie; it was a series called Blacklist, and it actually quoted that a guy was hiding away from the world, a criminal, and he was hiding in Nova Scotia.
Well, I guess this could be a place to hide. Nova Scotia is the one of the eastern provinces of Canada. So we are on the east coast, and it's in on the Atlantic Ocean. We're not the easternmost part of Canada because actually beyond the coast, we've got another province that's actually an island. That's Newfoundland. And so they're the easternmost, but in terms of mainland, we're the easternmost. So we're above Maine. If you were to try and picture it on the map, we're above Maine on the U.S. side, and that's where we are. And that's where I've been for the last 7 years.
Wow, 7 years. Time
Yeah,
passes by so quickly. So, friends,
absolutely.
we're here with Bushle, and I'll just have him say a little bit about what he's currently doing. But I'm also going to do what we like doing on the show to honor our leaders, and if I may say, in a way, that we this is how we do it right here. I'm honored today to have a co-partner who's going to be conversationally leading this session with me of an hour of what we believe to be conversational story sharing, and then also I believe to be cutting edge. Sorry to say it that way, but I know Bushle spends a lot of time thinking about issues to build communities. So yeah, Bushle, if you wouldn't mind greeting all these folk that come online and get access to this resource. And like you do, you've hosted many shows as well and lots of keynotes. But welcome our listeners and let them know what we're going to be doing today.
Awesome, Seth. Thank you for having me and joining with you in this session. And Seth and we've come a long way, and I guess we'll delve into that. Well, currently, and I guess for the last 18 years, really, I have been involved in people development, and I've worked in many different platforms in doing that, having been an entrepreneur myself, having started my own organizations, having helped to find and to found community engagements organizations and social enterprises and so on. I am currently an expert at Tomorrow Today, focusing on cultural intelligence, focusing on organizational culture and diversity. And so I speak to audiences around the world. Prior to COVID, I've been traveling all over the world. I would spend about 8 times maybe in a year in South Africa. So even though I've lived here for the last 7 years, for my folks in South Africa, it felt like I never left, because every couple of weeks, every few weeks, they would be seeing me again. But since COVID, I've been stuck here, and so doing a lot of my work now in a virtual way, like we're doing now.
Buhle, thank you for sharing that. And those of you that are hearing or listening to Buhle today, you can hear him. He just mentioned the organization Tomorrow Today, an excellent organization that's working globally. Buhle has been associated to them for many years. And when you hear him saying he's founded and started up many startups. There's been many ideas, many innovations. He's a noted entrepreneur. So let me do justice by his professional profile, if I may, as I bring to you a friend, a colleague, but I want to do justice by his own rights as a leader. Buhle is a South African award-winning entrepreneur and author who's currently based in Canada and travels regularly to South Africa. As you just heard, COVID-19 upset that rhythm. He has had 18 years of speaking and consulting to global audiences annually. Buhle helps his audiences understand future trends, shaping the world of work today. Leverage the benefits of diversity with cultural intelligence, and show leaders how to create the most productive, effective organizational cultures. He has received a Nation Building Award from our own Archbishop Desmond Tutu, worked with leaders around the world, including former President Nelson Mandela, and he is an associate of the Cultural Intelligence Center in Michigan. On top of that, friends, he is an author of 6 books, including his latest book, Unleashing Your Greatness, of which I can say that I have that book in my library. And so, friends, without further ado, this is my dear colleague and friend, and if I may say, he's one that I consider to be in a beloved community. So, Buhle, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us today. It's going to be awesome fun hanging out with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Seth.
So you know the man, you know the title, you know the profile, but I'd like you to hear this viewing right now. And as we take a moment, we're going to get ready to step behind the titles, get behind the organizations, and reach to the story. But the best way I know to prep that and prime it is by giving us access to what Buhle has also been in the know of. This has been a campaign, not one person or one speaker or an author or writer, but can we imagine globally? In South Africa, 18,000 people had a chance to engage in story sharing through the work of What's Your Story and linking to Heartline. So I just put that out to us all, that in such a time as this, here's a viewpoint of story sharing where the power of story has the ability to connect people. 18,000 people engaged in a campaign right across the country. Now that's may sound insignificant in light of us being a country about 60 million people. But as we get a chance today to listen to Buhle, please won't you allow me to share with you a video resource that comes to us from this campaign. And as we do listen, let it set a tone for us as we think through, the power of story. What does story have the power to do in light of our people resources, our organizational resources? And since we have Buhle in studio, we have one that is speaking and working in that light. Enjoy this video resource as we prime our moment for taking a moment to do some story sharing with Buhle Dlamini.
The world moves fast around us. Sometimes it feels like a blur. We pass each other and make judgments of each other constantly. You're doing it right now, seeing this woman across the street. We cross and recross, but rarely connect. We struggle to understand each other, so we don't trust each other. I know your name, but I don't know who you are. You know my name, but do you know my story? What would help us see beyond our perceptions? Story. Our stories are what make us human. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. Sharing a story isn't hard. It's a simple human act, connecting us deeper to people we already know. Reach out, ask, invite, then listen, truly listen. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. They help us understand. Ask, listen, tell. It's our way of building our nation. Heartlines has developed resources to help you on this journey. These resources will empower you to build understanding, trust, and reconciliation through personal storytelling. Imagine if we were part of a powerful wave of change, one story at a time. We all have a story to tell. What's your story?
I'm grateful for the work that we've been able to do with Heartlines and other organizations across South Africa. And as this work starts growing into the continent, I'm also aware right now that people are becoming more aware about the power of story. We are in studio with a global speaker and a diversity specialist of note, Buhle Dlamini. We're going to take a moment to engage with Buhle in his story. Who's behind the men, the books, the titles, and the global traveling? Welcome back, Buhle.
Thank you very much, Seth. I really love that.
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful video, and but I know that you've been a champion for many of these works, and including the organization of Heartlines. You're not foreign to them. You know them well, and in some of the work that you've done many years ago, and continue to have been a part of that work across the country. Buhle, there's a great story to tell. There's a long story to tell, but in this moment, I know that part of us being together, behind the title, behind the organization, what part of your story can you set in motion as we hear Buhle Dlamini today?
Thank you, Seth. I think it's always, that whole "What's Your Story" campaign is a really, really powerful campaign that really encompasses the whole Heartlines campaign from the beginning, and I can say that because I was there at the beginning of Heartlines and saw how this concept of the power of story can transform lives, and so most people, when they look at you, Seth, and when they look at me, people want to put people on pedestals and sort of like look at us as finished products, and so I'm sometimes very wary of sort of like the titles and all of those things that come with the work that we do, because typically it puts us on a pedestal and people think that we are something different than them. But my story is very much an every South African story. It's an everyman story, and I would like to believe that it's not unique, although many people would say it is. I say that it's not unique because of my background. Growing up in rural KwaZulu-Natal. It's not unique because of being raised by my grandmother, uMandlela Khumalo, which is very similar to many stories of South Africans out there who grew up in the era where our parents either had to work far away and we had to be raised by our grandparents, or parents passed on at a very young age. I was blessed to be raised by my grandmother, who instilled that foundation of faith that has been the foundation throughout my life. It has been something that has guided every decision that I make and that is a faith in Jesus Christ, and that's a faith in God and living my life in full surrender. So that's where my story starts in a way. But I think there's just so many elements to the story that in some ways it's hard to know which part to tell. But I can tell you this: I am married. I'm married to Stacy. Stacy is originally from here in Nova Scotia. And so that explains why the Zulu boy ended up in a place like this. We have 4 children, and you know them very well. Seth, our oldest, is 31 years old. Her name is Bijou. Our second is 22 years old. His name is Tlantla, who's also my brother. Our third is Trinity, and Trinity is 14 years old, and then Kaya, 9 years old. And that is, for me, that is sort of like where my world begins, and then it spreads out. It starts with my family. And I'm a proud grandfather now of a 1-year-old Zena from our Bijou. So obviously that doesn't tell you a lot of the backstories and all of that stuff. But other than that, there's many other stories. And maybe as we engage, you're going to tease it out and get it out. But that's who I am.
So Buhle, as I move towards that space and draw closer to your story, for example, as you just lined it up, behind the titles, behind the organizations, across all of the accolades that you've achieved, and I'll say achieved because it took a lot of work. One of the first companies in the post-apartheid era into the democracy was Young and Able, which you were one of the first entrepreneurs that birthed the company that was owned as an entrepreneur. I think even before academic arenas started thinking about the entrepreneurship word, there was Buhle Dlamini entrepreneuring, and so I remember it because while in those days, while you were going about Young and Able, I was working with Youth for Christ in Itemba. And I just want to honor this. Buhle was the first guy that said to me, Seth, there's going to come a time when you're going to need to fend for yourself, knowing who you are, and I want to encourage you to register your own company. I remember. Yes. I know the place. I know the time. I know which house we were in, and I know the car that you were driving, some BMW. and you said to me, Seth, you got to register that company because you're going to need, knowing where you may go in life, register. Now, Buhle, as a South African of Indian heritage, living out inside Joburg, I never thought that I could, it never struck my mind to register a company. But there you were in 2002, 2003, saying, Seth, get something registered that creates a space for your ideas. So I know in many ways that's who you've been for a long time. And not a lot of people know that. So I want to put that out there around the story of Buhle Dlamini. He's crossed over terrains. He's challenged people to lift their ideas and create. There's many of you that are even watching. I see one of our fellow, now today she's working in a pastoral space. Desiree Datini says, hello, Buhle. Another colleague that went and launched businesses and worked inside that entrepreneurship space. But here's how we get behind the story. And I have access to this, so I want to just pull on it. I know you love writing. I know you love reading. But I also know that there are certain things that people wouldn't know, like even in an organization that we work with young people about writing books, there's an activity design that a few years ago, when I told people for the first time where that came from, writing your own story, capturing your own story, is actually linked to this person, to this man, to this leader. And I'd like you to just take a moment to share with people about growing up in Tlabisa and how many books you had access to, but that's where the hunger came to write books. And now you've done it, 6 books, an author of 6 books, selling a part of your training packages around the world. Look, it's not all a fancy life, but I know it's you work hard to do what you do, but there's a story behind the story. So I'd like you to tell him a little bit about how that love for books and writing became yours.
Awesome, Seth. I think that often we allow our circumstances and our background to determine who we are. And that is something that I learned very early in my life. Thankfully, that it's not your circumstances that determine where you end up. It's not where you come from that counts. It's not where you find yourself. It's not even who you're born to that counts. It's what's in you that counts. And so if we understand that, we have a story, that first and foremost, we have to discover a story of ourselves, a story of who we are. And then follows then that we have a responsibility to protect and to be custodians of the story that we share with the world. The school that I went to in Tlabisa, actually, Tlabisa is a bigger area, but I grew up in a smaller place in Tlabisa, which is called Unwane. I know Tlabisa is hard enough for people. Unwane then becomes even more hard. But I went to a school there, and the school that I went to didn't have books, and I'm talking about textbooks. And I remember that it was only when I was in grade 10 that was the first time we had a library at my school. And by a library, I mean a cupboard of books that had been donated to my school. And out of over 1,000 students, only 5 of us took the opportunity to go and take out the books. And the reason for that, I think there are many reasons, because sometimes it might make me look a little bit sanctimonious telling this story. But the truth of the matter is, our library was in the teacher's staff room, and the teacher's staff room also happened to be the school hall, and so it was also going to be the library. So to get to the library, you had to pass through all of these teachers, which you were scared of, because back in those days we used to get cuts, not like today.
Proper cuts.
And so it took courage to walk into the library. It's like, going into the lion's den. But I remember taking out books, and here I was still studying by candlelight, but I was reading about traveling to the moon, and I was reading about, astronomy and space travel. And here I was still having to fetch water from the river, but I was thinking about traveling the world and about entrepreneurship. And so it wasn't that my circumstances changed, but it's that I seized an opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of that opportunity. And they changed everything for me. And so that's been sort of like part of my story throughout, is recognizing that you have to seize an opportunity when it presents itself. Seize it in that moment, because opportunities have lifetimes and you can't lose it.
I love that story, because here we have those of you that may be out there. If you have been thinking upon writing, you better get to that. And today, Buhle, we do have access to libraries. Not all schools,
absolutely,
in South Africa. And just to clarify, those of you that are globally and you heard us joking about getting the jacks, it's really that back in the day, corporal punishment was allowed. And those of us that were a little bit on the naughty side couldn't actually go to the. We went to the principal's office. You were not going there just to say hi. They're going to sort you out. But there's this work that we've done, and when you were at the helm of Young and Able for an organization called Shanduka and the Adopt a School program, that one of the key focuses were that they were investing in just putting amazing libraries in public schools all across the country. I remember King Shaka High School in KwaZulu-Natal. They took us over to show us what they were excited about. And they showed us just a most amazing reading room. But I mean, it wasn't just a reading room. It now was a fully fledged library in a township school. And so, Buhle, as I hear that today, I hope that those of you that may be listening to this, the power that reading brings into the life of students. And the way that you just said, Buhle, that while your circumstances didn't change, the imagination, the projection of a life beyond was just amazing. And so I thank you for taking that moment with us too. This next moment, after you.
I want to stick with that just a little bit, because I think that, some people know our story and they know my story. And so people hear about Young and Able, and people hear about Hotlines, and people hear about all of these things. I just want to mention that for me, the foundation has been being part of the Salvation Army, for example, as my church. They created a foundation where it opened opportunities, and then later on being part of Youth for Christ. And again, it's almost like in your life, you have all of these opportunities and organizations, and your church, whatever association that you find yourself in, that you can let yourself into, and if you buy into their mission and their purpose, and allow yourself to grow in that. I'm talking maybe to young people who are watching this and are thinking, what is it for me? Right where you are, you have those opportunities to expand, starting from somewhere.
Beautiful. Buhle, this next moment, I wanted to make sure we kept it for you because I know you weren't here with me. Many years before you left, and this, I remember this. It was unfortunate, but when Buhle left 7 years ago, Nelson Mandela just had passed away in that December, and we are in the month of July, which marks really for the globe the commemoration of the International Day of Nelson Mandela, which really has become a part of the culture of the world thinking upon how do we pay back? How do we, in a way, pay it forward? Not just pay back, but pay it forward. How do we get involved? And so I want to bring you, and actually, this video that I'm about to play, anyone else who was in studio, they would look at it as a resource. Buhle knows this because he actually project managed this campaign. So there's great symbolisms today, and I want to bring this up. And we'll call it, if you like, as we step away from the screen, Madiba values. So think upon it as Madiba values, and what can values-based leadership do for us in such a time as this? So give us a moment as we now step away to let our honorable president close out this this video. This is our late honorable Nelson Mandela about Madiba values. Check this out.
Today I will love.
Today,
I
will give my compassion first and my judgment last.
will persevere, no matter how difficult the path I travel. I want to be honest in all I say and all I do.
Today I will be responsible, not just for myself, but for my family.
I will strive to forgive because forgiveness frees your heart.
I will learn self-control because there's a time for everything under heaven.
I will accept you, not because we're the same,
But because God made us different.
Today I will show grace because a second chance may change a life.
Values sustain any walk to freedom, and values commit us to a continuing walk.
Well, I'm in studio at Buhle. I apologize if there was a glitch there. We may have had a little bit of a delay in the video coming through, but I'm in studio at Buhle Dlamini. That was a moment I wanted to observe with him on the show because he knows that video resource and it brings to you the voice of Nelson Mandela in a time such as this. The quote that comes out of that is not quoted online. By the way, I just have to tell you, if you went to look for that quote on the net, you wouldn't find it as one of the quotable quotes, but it's only in this video resource. And Nelson Mandela said it. Values sustain any walk to freedom, and values commit us to a continuing walk. I'm giving you a hashtag right there with Madiba. Hashtag values-based leadership. Buhle, what do you say about that?
Well, Seth, you just took me right back because I was in the room on that day when we filmed Mandela doing this. And when I talk about having worked with former President Nelson Mandela, I'm mostly talking about this day. Nelson Mandela agreed to be part of our opening sequence for Heartlines films. And this was back in 2006. And I was a project manager for television and drama at Heartlines. And we had gone through a journey of getting Nelson Mandela and the Nelson Mandela Foundation to be part of this. And Mandela full-heartedly said, this is what our nation building it has to be about. It has to be about people living out their values. Now, as a young boy growing up in Hlabisa, there's no way that I would have thought that I would be part of this and I would engage with President Nelson Mandela. But here I was. And I remember the day I was really, really worried. I had my best suit. My wife was so jealous. Stacy was like, "Ah, I wish I could be there with you." But I was nervous, and I met Nelson Mandela a few years, about 2 years before that, and when he'd come out to the Salvation Army to do something, and so here I was standing there, and then Nelson Mandela walks in, and big smile on his face, and extends a hand. "Oh, young man, good to see you again." And I'm standing there thinking, there's no way he can remember Buhle, right? And while I'm still thinking that, he says, "Do you remember me?" and I've told that story, and what has come to become very clear over the years is that this is what Nelson Mandela did to a lot of people, especially if he knew that he had met them before in another circumstance, and always make the person feel like they're the most important person in the room. For me, values are not just what we say. Values are not what we do when the cameras are on, or what we do when there's going to be an article the next day. And Mandela lived by that. He lived his values in the way that he was. And so the value of integrity, I think one of the biggest values for Nelson Mandela was equality. And so whenever he did that, whenever he made the other person feel like they were the most important person, it was his way of elevating you. And I remember smiling, and I remember shaking his hand and thinking, I'm never going to wash my hand, and all of that. But at that same time, he empowered me in a way that I cannot describe to you. There is a sense that when we live out our values, we impart something into others. And so people will forget what we said. People will forget what we did, as Maya Angelou said, but people will never forget how we made them feel. That's what values do. And so if we live out our values, we impact our world in a powerful, powerful way.
Beautiful, Buhle. I knew that was gonna. Look at that. This, many other people will get that video resource and they won't know where it's from, but the context, the place, the time. I can only talk about walking into Nelson Mandela at the hospital, which wasn't such a cool experience because my dad had a heart attack. But we came out of the room and we walked in and bumped right into him. But he, as you just say, gentleman-like as ever, no stress, no worry, no fuss. The security guard bumped me out the way. Yes, he did. But just the magical moments of being in the space of someone who lets you feel like you are all that you are. All the beauty that you are is all that you are, and they see you for that. That there's a leadership there that one cannot describe more than saying it how you did. So friends, think upon that today. We don't put this out as a model code, almost like a holiness movement. You got to be holier than thou kind of approach. But no, we put it out to speak to you about the reality that values can be a bedrock of a society. What are the roots that are anchoring us, and what will the fruits that we live by become? In such a time as this, we've been in the last three months, and I also said to Buhle, I'm going to just give honor where honor's due. He knows that it happened. I just got back from Cape Town, March 15th, March 17th actually, and I said, no man, this COVID-19 was coming to us like wildfire. And we knew that the president had already told us, this is our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, that our country was going to go into lockdown. March 18th, which I believe was a Wednesday, I had a WhatsApp call with Buhle, and I just said, no, let me call up my compadre over there in Canada and say, hey, how you doing over there? And we just connected about what would be the pressure points, what would be going on. It was a great dialogue. And friends, out of that dialogue came this idea that we would launch an online broadcast which has now been going for the last 3 months, and we've had amazing opportunities to bring to South Africa and the world, whoever's been able to listen, voices. So Buhle, there's many beautiful connections right here. But right at this moment, what I'd like to do is move into that thread of us reflecting together. And so I brought a little bit of reflection ammo with me, and it's a writer that I came about because you hear Buhle talking about himself as a diversity practitioner, a diversity expert in the world of tomorrow today. And I simply and humbly will say to you all, we've done diversity and justice work in many spaces, but one of the reflections that have been sitting on my shoulder in a very tough way is to think upon how diversity actually has to point to justice.
Absolutely.
Diversity pointing to justice. So, Buhle, I bring along with me Melissa Stein's quote. Internationally, much diversity discourse and literature links diversity to profit by ensuring more productive and sustainable workplaces. That's what she says right at the get-go. This is not rocket science. Those of you that have been denying us the opportunity to diversify places, you've literally been saying no to the bottom line profit margin. That's what we've been doing. But on the other side of the statement, this is what she goes on to say, and she brings it more real to South Africa. Now, I'd like to lend that to the rest of the world. In South Africa, Melissa Stein says to us, Buhle, diversity management has to be linked to social justice. Because if we don't manage people's expectations of a fairer, more equitable dispensation, it won't work. So I've been reflecting on that, and I know Buhle has been with me in different spaces that we've served in different organizations. But this is sitting on my shoulder. Today, when I think about beloved community, which is our focus in July, we cannot do community and beloved community if diversity and difference doesn't mean our gathering, our involvement, our investment together that will formulate and bring about a new normal around issues of social justice. And that's what I am calling us as leaders, as followers, as wherever you are, wherever you're at. If you're a CEO, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a person working at a school, if you're working in a corporate space, if you do have influence, whatever you do have in your hand, the little or much that you have, can we start to work with the difference of who we are, but not just for diversity's sake, but that diversity will start to point towards an equitable future where social justice can no longer be denied. So, Buhle, that's my critical reflection that I add to our coffee table or virtual coffee shop.
Excellent, Seth. I think as we are bringing, the beloved community, as we bring What's Your Story into this engagement, it is in the power of story that we need to talk about diversity and we need to talk about social justice. I think that we as a society are often guilty of collective amnesia. We quickly want to move on to sort of like the future, to what may be. We want to move on to talking about everything being okay. That we fail to realize that diversity in itself, the act of bringing difference together, that's what diversity is, in itself is not enough. There's a journey that needs to be taken, and that journey requires acknowledgement of the injustices that have taken place, and then it also requires the rewriting, not the rewrite as in rewrite history, no, the rewrite as in on the right side, the rewriting of the wrongs that have been done. And so take you and I, Seth. When we meet back in 1999. I had grown up in rural KZN. The first time that I am in an environment where I have diversity, where I'm in a mixed congregation, is when I am doing my matric, and so that's the first time I'm introduced to a diverse environment in South Africa. Well, actually, it was the year before matric, grade 11, 1994, the actual year of Mandela becoming president. And I remember in Durban being in our Salvation Army church. Now, I'd moved from Hlabisa to Durban to be with my dad. And so there I was looking for a church. And then I heard on radio that the Salvation Army band was playing somewhere. And I was like, oh, there's my church. So I ran down to town and connected with Durban Central. Now, Durban Central in 1994 was a whites-only church. Now there were some colored folk that were part of the church, but the church itself was not diverse in South Africa. And sometimes we kind of like move on very quickly. I won't stay there too long, but I remember the first time that I engaged in a deep relationship with people of Indian descent is when I'm at YFC. So growing up in Natal, as a Zulu person, you grow up with a mistrust of Indians. These are the things that we want to gloss over and not talk about in our South Africa. But I remember being hosted by Uncle Mutu and his family, and I remember the first time that real connection, and then meeting your family, Seth, and feeling like I finally found my other home, and all of those things. Each step in this process is about unlearning the preconceived ideas, the things that have been put into us. I remember when I was doing matric, for those who are here in Canada, matric is your grade 12. It's your last year of school. And I remember that was the first time Uncle Ben and Auntie Jeanette, this white couple at our church, invited me to stay with them because my father had lost his work and had gone back to the rural areas. And so I moved in with a white family and finished my schooling in that environment. All of these steps are important. I remember when my wife and I were just about to get married, and she came back from Canada, and we went up to Rustenburg. And I remember literally being chased by a farmer. We were driving my sister's car, and this farmer in a big bakkie. And he was literally trying to get us off the road because here were these two young people. This is 2001 into 2002. Here are these two young people, obviously in love, and he wasn't having it. And you would remember our wedding in Durban, how many people came out of their flats to take pictures in 2002 and so on. So the journey to diversity has not been an easy one, even just as recent as our own lifetimes. What tends to happen is that then we want to quickly move on to say, okay, everybody's here now, let's just move on. But we fail to realize the obstacles, the steps, and the challenges that many people from previously disadvantaged communities are still today, not had to, but today are still carrying on. And having been involved in this space, often we, as practitioners, we are very guilty of promoting a very glossy picture of diversity and inclusion and ignoring the social injustices that still prevail. We bring people into our spaces, but limit them from having opportunities that will really lift them up from the situations they're in. There's so much to unpack when we talk about this that actually sometimes it helps to bring it into a story format to say, there is a journey that we're going, that we have been going on, and that we still need to go on. And part of the journey is being honest and truthful about what it actually takes.
And as you're sharing, Buhle, I'm also reminded that it took for your wedding, just your wedding alone. And those of you that might wonder, why was this farmer in Northwest worrying about Buhle? Well, that's because his wife Stacy, if you don't know Buhle Dlamini and his wife, she would present herself, and I'd say, as an aesthetic colorization as a white female. So here he was in 2001, wherever he was in the Northwest, and that was why this farmer was disrupted. But like Buhle, you're saying right here, this is not a story that's far away. It's still currently happening. We see it in the George Floyd happening. We see it in Colin Scoza passing away in South Africa. But what I want to draw out of what you just said, Buhle, is we cannot take any single act of kindness as as to be disregarded. Why? Because when you as you just said it, Uncle Muthu, by the way, Buhle, I should just say, and Uncle Muthu passed on 2 weeks ago or just a week ago. Sorry to let you know online, but Uncle Muthu and Morgan and his family had to say goodbye to his dad in COVID-19 circumstances. But his name, as you named it, brought an interaction with a family in a cultural space and a language space and a race space that was different. Now, someone might say, well, that's just people doing their acts of kindness. No, it's not actually just an act of kindness. It's not a revolutionary act that you might say it didn't turn over nothing. But what did it do? It closed the gap in someone's learning, someone's understanding. The family that housed you, Bullshit, while your dad got sick or lost his job, as you said, they closed the gap so that you had an opportunity to finish your education. Now, those of us that are out there, we need us to do the macro stuff. But we also got to get involved in the micro stuff. And Bullshit, this is what I'll end to, and I'll turn into the space of the disruption. It's like sometimes we have people who have seen the big change. Like, in South Africa, we saw a big change. Apartheid ends, democracy is birthed. But for the big change to happen, it takes a long time. And then we need for the economic justice to take place, the everyday happenings to take place. That means we need heart, mind, and soul change, where people are starting to act and behave in different ways. I mean, it's no shock to the world, but just to say to you all, on a call that we did with a group of folk on a conversation just 2 days ago, Bullshit, I said to them, don't romanticize South Africa like that. Yeah, there you sitting in Canada. We've still got racial issues in our country. We've got issues where people are holding a bigotry view, holding a racist view, holding a gender biased view. I mean, one young lady, and the organization from Columba Leadership, said to us, I'm not just black, I'm black times two. I'm black and I'm female. Now, it disrupts me, Bullshit, because we're living in a society where for your daughter, my daughter, for the 25 million people, 18 to 25 million people in our land that are still outside the gravy train of a so-called democracy. And while we're talking about economic hardships, they were even there, they were in that hard time before COVID-19.
Yes.
So we're needing a disruption where the little small acts are not dislocated from the power that it affords. Because what does it do? It's not just disregarded, but we're going to have a lot more of these small acts taking place to see this emergence of the great shift. So why is it disrupting me? I'll say, Buhle, is because we're sometimes so heady. We're in our head, we're sitting at the top level stuff, but we don't want to do the bottom down, earthy, grounding work. And I think that's important, that we need to see, for justice sake, people that are working on the ground.
I think when we talk about diversity, Canada has just launched the Black North Initiative, which is really an initiative that is recognizing that we need more Black leaders in executive spaces. I apologize for the noise outside. Someone has decided to cut the lawn across the street, and I can't do anything about it. but what we're recognizing here in Canada, especially in places where Black people are a minority. So in South Africa, we have a different dynamic. But here in North America, we have a dynamic where Black people are a minority. And this was a big thing for me. And since I don't get to talk about these things, this is a great platform to talk about it. So coming from being a majority, yes, we had our struggles. Yes, we had and we continue to have our struggles in South Africa. But there's something that is powerful about being part of a majority. There's power in numbers. There's that sense that, yes, I'm going through, but hey, Sbego and Stole and Nika down the road, they're also going through the same stuff and so on. And so there's that solidarity. When I came into Canada, one of the things that I recognized, which is a further disempowerment in the society of minorities here, is the fact that you're always the other. You're always the other in every context. You are the other even in your church context. You are the other in your neighborhood context. You are the other in the workplace. And so this otherness follows you around. And so this is important for me to speak about, because a lot of people have been asking me, or a lot of people have been saying to me, why are you so animated about this Black Lives Matter issue? And I want to say to people, I'm animated by this because if you have not experienced uh, the experience of the otherness, of being the other, you will never understand the challenges that people go through on an ongoing basis. And so every time you step into any environment, you're always standing out. So that's the first step. Then there comes another level. This is now the level of the learned prejudice. So the learned prejudice in our racialized, systemic racist systems is that the learned prejudice tells the other when they walk in the door that they are not equal. It says you have to prove yourself that you actually are at the level that everybody else is at. And once you've proved yourself, you still have to jump a few more hoops before you can actually get to this executive position. So when we talk about social justice, we're not just talking about not being killed in the streets. When we're talking about social justice, we're actually talking about recognition. We're talking about people getting their due. We're talking about people being recognized for their work. We're talking about people not being sidelined for opportunities. So this is much deeper than police and so on. And so when we talk about social justice and we talk about economic justice, those are some of the things that we have to think about. And yes, Seth, you are right. It starts with the small individual acts. So if you are working with colleagues that are different from you, that are not part of the majority, these are some of the things that you have to think about. Now, in the South African context, if I can just add this, in corporate spaces, this is where it becomes funny. Because yes, in society, Black people or people of color are a majority, but you find that in corporate spaces, the higher you go, minority, well, they're not minority, but sort of people of color and Black people then become the minority. And so you have a very different situation there. And so in South Africa, the same issues still apply in corporate spaces where people, even though they're majority out there, when they're sitting in the boardroom, it's like, oh, hey, Baba, and there's that sense that you don't really belong here, but hey, we're happy you are here. What's the Black view on the matter? And those are some of the things that we laugh about, but actually they are very problematic with the way that corporate South Africa is still handled today, where Black people are invited into spaces, and I know personally how that feels like, to be invited into spaces because maybe you are deemed to be, the different Black, the exceptional Black, or the one that can fit into these spaces, and so on. So these are all the things we've got to dismantle all of these things. Things that say, oh, people who have an accent like Buhle Dlamini can sit at this table. I have to say that because these are the things that then get directed back at me by my own people that think that I'm part of that system or I'm part of that or those kinds of things. No. So we have to dismantle these layers that are there in our corporate spaces if we're going to see social justice.
Beautiful. I mean, this might be ironic, but if you're in South Africa and you heard Buhle speaking from Canada, Black North Initiative, and if you're a CEO, if you got an influence in a company, let's be honest, the minority factor, as Buhle has defined us, in our country, in South Africa, for the world to know, is not just about numbers of population. We define minority about identity politics and economic politics. So those of you that are out there, if you and Buhle, what you're just saying, it's real stuff. People walking into places every day. I mean, India writes that song, I am not my hair. I'm not my skin. I'm not your expectations. No. But yeah, every day people are weighed up and against it. Buhle, thank you for speaking so richly to this issue around justice, not just for the sake of ticking the box, but justice for its depth and its quality and its majestic magnitude that can transform our world. So as we come to close, we're at the top of the hour. I know Buhle is busy. Just some key stuff, Buhle. What can we do in a time like this when we think about a call to action and service? We don't want to go, for some people, I mean, I was in an academic arena. I won't mention the name because it won't be nice on this one. But academics saying, oh, we'll go back to normal. I said to them, come on, dude. Don't say that. For some people, I don't want to go back to life before COVID-19 because life before COVID-19 was already bad. They're hoping that this bad disaster, this global pandemic, will bring about a new normal that hopefully can take us to a new place. Today, Buhle, the Anglican Church, with Bishop Thabo Makgoba, was having a consultation with about 6 or 7 women leaders in the Anglican Church, challenging the issue on gender-based violence. That is not just violence of hitting people. We're talking about raping women, killing women, not outside the church, inside the church. So, Mr. Dlamini, sir, if I may ask you, in such a time as this, where can we get plugged in to a call when you sing action service for a greater and better future?
I think it has to start with you. It has to start with the individual. And I've seen it in our lives, in our journey together over the last 20 years, Seth, 21 years actually now. So in that journey, it is a personal journey as much as it is a collective journey. So the journey to social justice, the journey to racial justice, the journey to the future of inclusion it starts on a personal level. And so that's where I would start. I would say to us who are watching, who are thinking about these things, we've got to listen more. So for us as men, we've got to listen to what women are saying are the issues. We've got to listen to what they're dealing with. But let's not just stop at listening and saying, oh, I hear you. Let's also then move on to create spaces. What I mean by that is that the male privilege that you and I enjoy, Seth, allows us into spaces, and often we will go into those spaces without thinking about who is not here. Where are the female voices? And if the female voices are there, we don't stop to say, where are the black female voices? And so take it further, and so on. And when those voices are in the room, we don't stop to say, are these voices listened to? Are they given a chance to speak? Or are they just cosmetic additions? And so this is where it starts. And so the journey that we have been on in terms of the racial justice and the racial injustice that we're fighting continues even more on the gender side. And it requires men like you and I to actually be on the right side of this issue. And it's amazing how easily we forget how it feels like to be on the underside, or to be the underprivileged, or to be the voice that's not heard when we get given the opportunities and the platforms. So I want to challenge specifically men with our male privilege that we need to do more. We need to listen. We need to invite participation. And then we need to step back. That's a hard part. Many times, if you are involved in the space of bringing others on board, the hardest thing for people is to step back and let others run and let others lead. I've tried to do that in my life. I've tried to start things, get them going, and then let others lead, let others take over. And I've been criticized for that in some spaces, and I understand why. Because sometimes when leaders step out, it creates a vacuum, and so on. But we've got to trust that the next generation, or that the next leaders, have the ability, in the same way that we were entrusted with that trust, to actually do the work. So it starts with the leaders. It starts with the leaders, and it starts with the individuals to create this beloved community.
Buhle, if I may, I just want to take the last moment. Please say a little bit about your writing and your speaking. I want to just say to you all, Buhle is in the Northern Hemisphere, but he's fully plugged on. As you can see, he is online. So if there are speaking conversations that are out there through Tomorrow Today, please connect with him. Please make a booking. Many of my friends that are sitting out in the States, I know that you guys are looking right now for consultants, for speakers around issues of justice, issues of diversity. I know Buhle, one of the you really celebrated that moment. It was a massive delivery. When I saw the picture of and it was in a place that I previously was with you many years ago, some Quad Cities or somewhere like that. But it was a corporate delivery that they called you on to be a keynote around issues of inclusion and justice. I'd just like you to say just a little word about that, where that conference was. And then also, if I may plug in, please read Buhle Dlamini. There are books out there there we go. So please put that in right now and say a little bit about that connected to what you're doing. And I would love for people out there, if you're looking for an awesome speaker who has the ability, who has the persona to take the stage, and if I can say hit the ball out the park, you better book this dude. So Buhle, please give us a little plug-in about your talks and what you're doing. So if there's anyone out here in the corporate arena, and even though he's sitting in Canada, you can book him right now. And he can come in via synchronous teaching, synchronous speaking. He's done a few of it already, so that the work can continue, because we want the work to continue with people who care about this work, love the work, and want to see an equitable future for the globe. Okay? So Dlamini, close the show out, please.
Excellent. As a speaker, as you heard already a little bit of my story, it's really about unleashing your greatness, and so this is one of the topics that I speak on, that is the most requested topic. Even now that I'm working with Tomorrow Today, I was speaking in Singapore just last year. I was speaking in Thailand earlier this year before COVID broke out. I was there with Graham Coddington and with Sanofi, an international pharmaceutical, with their international team. And straight after that, came back to North America, and I was speaking in Grand Rapids in Michigan.
That's it.
Yeah, to a full audience of about 1,000 women, and still today, I'm still engaging with many groups online from that engagement using virtual engagement. So I do speak on unleashing your greatness. I speak on helping leaders understand future and change, and so organizational culture and owning the future. I do speak around diversity and inclusion as something that I'm passionate about. Right now, I'm working on something with a client here in Canada to help them deal with the issue of unconscious bias and to engage around that. So yes, I'm available online. Go to buhledlamini.com. That's my website, buhledlamini.com, and you can book me from there. And I look forward to engaging with you in different ways. Thank you very much, Seth, for this opportunity to be part of these great engagements and sessions. And thank you for letting me just be myself and maybe speak a little bit more off the cuff than I normally do, but to be real. And so thank you for that.
Buhle, we appreciate you. Greetings to Stacy and the children. Please tell them our family say hello. And yeah, I know that we were all looking forward to be together next month, but COVID-19 has brought about different circumstances.
Absolutely.
And our best wishes to you and the family. And greet the Jeffries as well.
Yes.
Tell them I'm no longer having my bowl of sugar with my coffee. Just one spoon of sugar now. Much appreciation to you. Thank you, my dear friend. All the love and best wishes to you and the family.
Oh, thank you. All the best.
Bye for now.
Bye.
So, friends, that's at the top of the hour. We had Buhle Dlamini with us in the studio. What an awesome time of connecting through conversational story sharing. And I just loved having him in studio because of the resources that I brought to you around, and we brought to you, not just I, but we brought to you around values through Madiba values and what was created in the time around a Heartlines campaign, working with the Nelson Mandela Foundation way back when. And I hope that you are able to take away from this conversation something that is insightful, that gets you thinking, even in such a time as this, that we can do something significant. We can make an action. We can take an action that is significant in light of impacting at least one other person's life positively. And hopefully, if many more people start to do that, it will add to a systemic kind of thrust. Now, it's both and. We got to take it from the top, but we got to take it bottom up. So those of us that are working together to do what we do, please continue to be the best that we can be. A lot of it has been put already out on the table, but I want to close out the show as I did earlier for those that were here, and just to, if I may, solidify what Buhle and I have been in conversation about through the words and the teachings of Margaret Heffernan. And it's a video used some years ago. It's a longer talk that you can watch on YouTube. But think upon it. Watch out for the syndrome of superstardom. Watch out for the syndrome of super chickens in light of beloved community. How can the community that you serve in, that you work in, how can your workplace be more equitable, more just? And as I close out the show, enjoy this just a 5-minute delivery by Margaret Heffernan on the reality of teams and the social connection of people. Thank you very much for joining myself and Buhle Dlamini. I hope we've earned the privilege and the honor of your time. Thank you for joining in with us through conversational story sharing on In Such a Time as This. Over to Margaret Heffernan.
An evolutionary biologist at Purdue University named William Muir studied chickens. He was interested in productivity. I think it's something that concerns all of us. But it's easy to measure in chickens because you just count the eggs. He wanted to know what could make his chickens more productive, so he devised a beautiful experiment. Chickens live in groups, so first of all he selected just an average flock and he let it alone for 6 generations. But then he created a second group of the individually most productive chickens. You could call them super chickens. And he put them together in a super flock. And each generation he selected only the most productive for breeding. After 6 generations had passed, what did he find? Well, the first group, the average group, was doing just fine. They were all plump and fully feathered, and egg production had increased dramatically. What about the second group? Well, all but 3 were dead. They'd pecked the rest to death. The individually productive chickens had only achieved their success by suppressing the productivity of the rest. What is it that makes some groups obviously more successful and more productive than others? Well, that's the question a team at MIT took to research. They brought in hundreds of volunteers, they put them into groups, and they gave them very hard problems to solve. And what happened was exactly what you'd expect, that some groups were very much more successful than others. But what was really interesting was that the high-achieving groups were not those where they had 1 or 2 people with spectacularly high IQ, nor were the most successful groups the ones that had the highest aggregate IQ. Instead, they had 3 characteristics, the really successful teams. First of all, they showed high degrees of social sensitivity to each other. This is measured by something called the reading the mind in the eye test. It's broadly considered a test for empathy, and the groups that scored highly on this did better. Secondly, the successful groups gave roughly equal time to each other, so that no one voice dominated, but neither were there any passengers. And thirdly, the more successful groups had more women in them. Now, was this...
Well, it's not me who said it, but Margaret Heffernan. The more successful groups had more women in them. Pay attention to this. You can see the resource online. I'm grateful today to have been in studio with Buhle Dlamini and also Loide and Demoide that joined us this morning. Awesome colleagues and friends that have utilized the time with us to invest in story sharing, conversational story sharing, and thought leadership that hopefully gets us to shift the future. Those of you that are out there, I'm hoping that you are inspired to take positive action to do some work in light of creating that equitable future for us all. Thank you to Loide and to Buhle for being in studio with me today. We look forward to being with you next week. A highlight for next week is that Naomi Tutu will be on the show with us. And just as of today, as we look to August, Dr. Chung Yung Kyung, who spent a lot of her time focusing on what one would say solidarity, moving from lazy pluralism to active solidarity, and focuses on Asian women theologians. I read a few years ago, but just today we've confirmed that she'll be on the show with us into August. And as we move to close July and move towards August, we're going to be moving our focus from beloved community towards women's lives and women's choices. And so we want to continue this work with you. But next week, well, I'm really looking forward to hosting. I think it's going to be at 3:30 because of the Tutu family having a meeting at 5. So we catered by moving the show but earlier. And again, spending time in conversational story sharing with Naomi Tutu and a few other colleagues that are still to be confirmed even in this week. They are booked, but it remains tentative. So thank you for joining the show. As we close out, I'll bring to you a little bit of a highlight of some of the last 3 months of engagement with beautiful people. And when we say beautiful people, there are beautiful people on the front lines who are serving, trying to make this world a better place. Not just in that iconic song, but actually mean what they say and say what they mean. I'm grateful that some of those people have been on this show on in such a time as this, and we're going to continue this work as we utilize the power of story sharing in partnership with organizations like Heartlines, in partnership with organizations like the Forward Youth Leadership Training Program, with SACLI, the South African Council of Churches, and other organizations as well that are willing to do the work to reach people and build this beloved community that actually can speak towards social justice. When diversity is working towards the end goals of reconciliation that is about justice. No peace, no justice. No reconciliation, no justice. So if we want this world to be this better place, we can make a difference, even in a struggling economy. Let's put our eye on that goal and work together. Thank you very much, and have an awesome evening. Goodbye for now, as we close out with the song, People on the Front Line. In such a time as this, conversational story sharing by thought leaders, practitioners, and activists from South Africa and around the world. Join us as we engage in critical reflections, disruptive learning, and a call to action and service so we can make a difference and lasting change in our everyday world.
Thank you to the people on the service line, people who care, people who share, courageous, caring people, beautiful people, courageous, serving people, beautiful people. We say thank you. Answers by courageous, caring people, beautiful people, courageous, serving people, beautiful people. Thank you to the people on the service line. Thank you to the people on the service line. People who care, people who share, courageous, caring people, beautiful people, courageous, serving people. people, beautiful people. We have cried since enough. We lament, what have we done? We will declare we shall overcome. Yes, we will declare we shall overcome. For we courageous, caring people, beautiful people. Courageous, serving people, beautiful people. We have cried since enough. We lament, what have we done? We will declare we shall overcome. Yes, we will declare we shall overcome. For we are courageous,